I think, films were the first form of narrative that I really came into contact with when I was younger. They're quite accessible to me, and I think going to the cinema was always felt like a kind of a bit of a magical experience in a way, because you could everything would be dark. You could come from the outside world and step in there, and it would be something very different. You could switch off for a couple of hours.
I've been going to the cinema since about 6 years old. I always enjoy the experience. It's something to be immersed in an alternate reality.
I guess films were kind of like my childminder in a way. So I was just plonked in front of the TV to watch films, and VHS as it was back then. And they kind of looked after me.
I grew up loving zombie films like Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead, so a lot of George A. Romero films. I love Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so the light stuff. And then I kind of moved on to a bit of Italian horror, such as Dario Argento and his films in the giallo genre, which is kind of a mix between slasher and thriller and horror, and with a lot of psychology to it. And so that's something I always look for. I was going here to see The Color Out of Space, which is based upon a short story by H.P. Lovecraft, who was a really foundational horror writer from the early 20th century. And his influence has been in a lot of horror cinema ever since, whenever you get that kind of blending between science fiction and horror.
Synecdoche King, New York is one of my favourite films because I write, and as a writer I feel like Charlie Kaufman's one of the most innovative writers. So anything that he's written, Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind is beautiful, Being John Malkovich, all those kind of strange, kind of somewhat painful films I really love. And Synecdoche, New York was his debut feature, and I think that's a masterpiece. And then obviously the obvious masters, Kubrick, all the classics that you would imagine me to say.
Going to since I was about 17, 18 now, and they've got a diverse range of films and a lot of cult classics, a lot of films you would never have seen before, and they really care about film. I think they're just the most idiosyncratic cinema in London. They are very unique.
You're small, you're independent, you're making up your own rules to a certain degree, obviously, and here we try to be a cinema for everyone. So, in the downstairs screen you might have Sing Along a Great Showman, and then in the upstairs screen you've got Fight Club. So there's a completely different set of audiences coming into the same cinema. We try and cater for everyone. And we try not to be, like I said, with what I like, we try not to say this is cinema, this is not, We're not Scorsese turning our backs on Marvel or whatever. I think all narrative works.
I'm only just kind of discovered that they are screening more classic and cult films as well, which I think is great. And I like that someone's curated a selection of things that are, not just current. I think it's great to get more diversity. I enjoy watching films from all over.
have a great programmer called Paul Vickery and a team kind of behind him, our general manager Greg, and also Ben, who owns the cinema. They are very good at kind of knowing the market. They've worked for many years in cinema, so they kind of understand the process. It's difficult because there is a lot to choose from,
Yes.
but at the same time, a lot of things aren't available. So the distribution rights will be held up with one company or another. Maybe there's a lot of films that we can't screen because maybe a company's gone under and they still own the distribution rights, and it's difficult to get rights to screen the film, so it becomes very complicated. So that narrows it down a little bit, and then also you have to narrow it down judging by who will actually buy tickets. So there's a lot of screenings that we'd like to put on, which may sell 5 tickets, and then obviously that doesn't quite work out for us. The unfortunate thing about being an independent cinema is you can't really take risks like that. I mean, you can, but if they don't pay off, you take a hit basically. So we try to hedge our bets somewhat by screening films that we know will be popular, and then if we've done well, we can then take a few more risks with stuff which are a little bit more obscure and perhaps only a very small amount of people will know about it.
You know, there's a lot of negative thoughts regarding the future of cinemas due to streaming sites and multiplexes. Actually, whenever I go here, it's pretty much full up. So it's always got a huge amount of audiences, and people still love going. Multiplexes have their place, but there tends to be, in my experience, a lack of atmosphere. You know, the more you can replicate a design feature or a piece of architecture or an interior space, the less special it feels when you're there. So when you go to an art house cinema, you have not only the input in a design sense from the people that are there, in the sense that it always looks different, but there's also the sense that the films themselves tend to be differently curated. So you'll have a different range of films on offer, some that you would never have seen, some classics that have kind of been dug up, and some newer releases that may not have even made it to the multiplexes. So they're important for that in that respect.
The only thing that sort of the normal multiplex places have is that generally they're showing new things that you haven't seen before. I mean, this generally shows old things I haven't seen before, in some respects. And obviously some new films, but you know, generally where there's, I mean, this place is more character. The selection's better. Multiplexes are ridiculously expensive. I mean, I don't know what they are. They've crept up to about £20 to get in now. I mean, I usually, if I go to what you might call see new films, I usually go to Stratford, the Picture House there. But anything sort of, you know, classic, I come here. I think this place is pretty safe and secure for the future.
So obviously, an issue I find with multiplexes is that for their setup of having 7 screens, the idea was to show a multitude of different films, and I don't think that they're delivering on that aspect. So unfortunately, they're still showing a very small amount of films, just a multitude of different times, which in essence is I don't think is what they were designed to do, and therefore it does open a new space up for other films to be shown at art house cinemas. And I actually think there's a lot of resurgence for art house cinema because people want something a little bit unique. They want to support local businesses or independent businesses like ours, and they can see where we are trying to do something which is catering more for customers and perhaps more for even the film industry, rather than say a multiplex or a bigger business which is purely basing their program or their decision on films around profit margin. So I think that the future is bright for for art house cinema. I feel like if you have an eye for what is good cinema and you want to showcase films that don't get a wide release or a mainstream cinema release, there's actually so many great films out there and people do want to see them. So I think that the future is very positive.